A common historical fact is that child labor was rampant across all industries in Victorian Britain, from textile mills and coal mines to chimney sweeping and street vending. Children as young as 5 or 6 years old were employed for long hours, often 12, 16 hours a day, for very low wages and in extremely dangerous conditions. You stir, not to the gentle chime of an alarm clock, but to a cacophony that assaults your senses long before your eyes even fully open. The insistent, guttural coughs from the other side of the thin, plaster-cracked wall tell you your neighbor is already up, battling the morning phlegm that seems to be a permanent resident in every lung in this part of London. Outside, the distant, mournful wail of a factory whistle cuts through the pre-dawn gloom, a piercing siren call that signals another day of relentless toil. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. The air, even within the supposed sanctuary of your tiny, shared room, is thick with the acrid scent of coal smoke, damp earth, and an underlying pervasive stench that you've long since stopped trying to identify. It's just London. For those not in factories, the streets are their workplace. You see the crossing sweepers, small boys and girls who sweep paths clean for wealthier pedestrians, hoping for a few coins in return. They stand for hours in all weathers, their faces chapped and red from the wind, their hands raw from the broom. Then there are the match sellers, tiny figures with trays of matches, their voices hoarse from shouting, "Matches, buy your matches." The competition is fierce, and a day's earnings might amount to mere pennies, barely enough to buy a piece of stale bread. It's a tough gig, especially when you're competing with other kids who have mastered the art of the puppy dog eyes. Your bed, if you can even call it that, is a straw-filled mattress shared with perhaps 3, maybe 4 other bodies, depending on how many new arrivals the lodging house took in last night. The straw rustles and crunches beneath you, a symphony of discomfort. You can feel the cold seeping up from the floorboards, even through the threadbare blanket that offers little more than symbolic warmth. The room is barely larger than a modern-day broom closet, yet it houses multiple families, or at least multiple individuals crammed together, each paying a few pence for a spot on the floor or a share of a bed. Privacy. That's a concept for the gentry, for those who live in houses with more than one room, let alone one bed per person. You learn to ignore the snores, the restless shifting, the occasional muttered nightmare. It's just part of the background hum of existence. One particularly obscure detail about Child Street vendors was the tragic prevalence of climbing boys, young chimney sweeps, often orphaned or sold into apprenticeship, who would climb inside narrow, dangerous chimneys to clean them. Many suffered from severe respiratory illnesses, burns, and deformities, and their lives were often short and brutal. The practice was eventually outlawed, but it highlights the extreme exploitation of children during this era. As you finally push yourself up, the chill bites at your exposed skin. You pull on the same clothes you wore yesterday, and probably the day before that, and the day before that. They are stiff with grime, perpetually damp, and carry the faint, stale scent of your own unwashed body and the accumulated effluvium of the city. There's no running water here, not for you. A single, communal pump in the yard, shared by dozens of families, offers water that is often murky and always cold. Washing is a luxury, a quick splash of the face and hands if you're lucky enough to get a turn before the sun is fully up and the queue stretches down the alley. You learn to live with the itch, the constant awareness of dirt beneath your fingernails, and the faint, clammy film on your skin. The rag pickers and mudlarks are another common sight. These children, often barefoot and dressed in rags, spend their days sifting through rubbish heaps or scavenging along the banks of the River Thames at low tide, looking for anything of value, discarded scraps of metal, old bottles, bones, or even bits of coal. It's a dirty, dangerous, and often humiliating existence. But every scrap found can mean a few pennies, or something to trade for food. They are constantly exposed to disease, injury, and the harsh elements. Stepping out of the lodging house, you are immediately enveloped by the morning fog, a thick, yellowish-gray shroud that hangs heavy in the air. This isn't just natural mist, it's the infamous pea super fog, a noxious cocktail of industrial pollution, coal smoke, and moisture. It stings your eyes, scratches at your throat, and coats everything in a fine layer of soot. You can barely see your hand in front of your face, let alone the faces of the other spectral figures emerging from doorways and alleys, all heading in the same direction, towards the factories, the docks, the workshops, the endless maw of London's economy. The air tastes metallic, a bitter tang of coal dust and something else. Something indefinable that feels like it's slowly corroding your insides. Education, for most of these children, is a distant dream. While some philanthropic efforts established ragged schools for the poorest children, offering basic literacy and numeracy, attendance was often sporadic, as the need to earn money always took precedence. The concept of a universal free education was still decades away. Their teachers are the streets, their lessons are survival, and their textbooks are the hard knocks of life. It's a curriculum that definitely doesn't include recess. The streets are already bustling, even at this ungodly hour. Horse-drawn carts rumble past, their iron-shod wheels clattering on the cobblestones, splashing muddy water onto your already soaked boots. Street vendors, their voices hoarse from years of shouting, begin to hawk their wares. Hot coffee, or matches by your matches. The smell of stale beer from a nearby public house mingles with the faint aroma of something vaguely edible from a pie shop, a scent that only serves to highlight the gnawing emptiness in your own stomach. You pass by open sewers, their putrid stench a constant companion, and piles of refuse that spill from overflowing bins onto the narrow pavements. This is the reality of urban life for the poor, a constant assault on every sense. It's like living inside a perpetually overflowing bin, but instead of just trash, it's also people. The academic debate still continues regarding the precise impact of early child labor laws, such as the Factory Acts, on the lives of working-class children. While these laws gradually reduced the working hours and improved some conditions, many historians argue that they also sometimes push children into even more unregulated and dangerous forms of labor, such as street vending or domestic service, where exploitation was harder to monitor. You join the stream of bodies, a river of humanity flowing towards the industrial heart of the city. Everyone looks the same, tired, gaunt, dressed in drab, dark clothing that blends seamlessly with the soot-stained buildings. Children, some no older than 5 or 6, shuffle along beside their parents, their small faces already etched with a weariness that belies their youth. They are not going to school, they are going to work. The idea of a childhood free from labor is a modern fantasy. Here, every pair of hands, no matter how small, is a potential source of income, a vital contribution to the family's desperate struggle to survive. It's a grim reminder that in this era, child labor laws were less laws and more suggestions if we ever get around to it. For many children, their home is the street itself, orphaned, abandoned, or simply driven from overcrowded homes. They sleep in doorways, under bridges, or in hidden corners of the city. They form small gangs for protection, sharing what little they have. Their camaraderie born of shared hardship, they learn to be streetwise, to steal when necessary, to avoid the police and the workhouse. Their lives are a constant struggle for survival, a desperate game of hide and seek with hunger and cold. As you walk, you notice the sheer density of the population. Every inch of space seems to be occupied, every building crammed with life. Tenements rise like dark, forbidding cliffs, their windows, if they have them, often broken or boarded up. Laundry hangs limply from lines strung across narrow courtyards, perpetually gray from the pervasive smoke. The sheer scale of poverty is overwhelming. It's not just a few unfortunate souls, it's an entire segment of society, a vast unseen army of the impoverished who fuel the engine of British prosperity. This is a common historical fact by the mid-19th century. London's population had exploded, leading to unprecedented overcrowding and the rapid growth of slums. The hunger that gnaws at your own stomach is even more pronounced in these children. Their small, growing bodies require more sustenance, yet they often receive the least. You see their distended bellies, their thin limbs, their eyes dull with perpetual hunger. They might beg on the streets, their voices thin and reedy, or try to snatch a dropped apple from a market stall, risking a beating for a fleeting taste of sweetness. Their childhoods are defined by this constant, gnawing emptiness, a hunger that shapes their entire existence. You finally reach your destination, perhaps a textile mill, its towering brick chimney belching black smoke into the already polluted sky. The air here is even heavier, thick with the smell of machine oil, raw wool, and the sweat of hundreds of bodies. The noise is deafening, the rhythmic clatter and bang of looms, the hiss of steam engines, the shouts of foremen. You step inside, and the heat hits you like a physical blow, a stark contrast to the damp cold outside. The air inside is filled with cotton dust, a fine, almost invisible powder that settles on everything, including your lungs. You know, deep down, that this dust is slowly, inexorably, killing you. But what choice do you have? Disease, as you know, is an ever-present threat. Children, with their weaker immune systems and constant exposure to unsanitary conditions, are particularly vulnerable. Measles, whooping cough, diphtheria, and scarlet fever sweep through the slums, carrying off thousands of children each year. You've seen their small bodies ravaged by illness, their faces pale and drawn, and you know that their lives, if they survive, will be short and filled with suffering. It's a bit like a game of musical chairs, but the music never stops. And if you don't find a chair, you get cholera. Your work begins immediately. If you're a man, you might be tending a massive steam engine, shoveling coal into its fiery maw, your face streaked with soot and sweat. The danger is omnipresent scalding steam, crushing machinery, the constant threat of an explosion. If you're a woman, you might be working at a loom, your fingers flying, tying broken threads with a speed born of desperation. The work is monotonous, repetitive, and utterly exhausting. Your back aches, your eyes sting from the poor light, and your hands are raw and calloused. There are no breaks, save for a few precious moments to gulp down a meager meal. The hours stretch on, endless and unforgiving, from dawn till dusk, sometimes even longer. Despite the immense hardship, you sometimes witness moments of incredible resilience and even joy in these children. A shared game of marbles in a dusty alley, a spontaneous burst of laughter over a silly joke, a moment of comfort found in the arms of an older sibling. These fleeting moments are precious, sparks of innocence that refuse to be extinguished by the harsh realities of their lives. They cling to hope, to small acts of kindness, to the simple fact of being alive. One particularly obscure detail about factory life for the poor was the widespread practice of strapping or beating children who fell asleep or were too slow. While often associated with the early Industrial Revolution, it persisted in various forms throughout the Victorian era, a brutal reminder of the dehumanizing conditions. Imagine a small child, barely able to reach the machinery, fighting against the overwhelming urge to sleep, knowing that a misstep or a moment of drowsiness could result in a severe beating, or worse, a lost limb in the machinery. It's a stark contrast to the romanticized image of Victorian childhood often presented in popular culture. You might try to protect the child with you, to shield them from the worst of the city's brutality. You teach them how to navigate the dangerous streets, how to spot a friendly face, how to avoid trouble. You share your meager food, even when your own stomach aches with hunger. You offer what little comfort you can, a hand to hold, a whispered word of encouragement. It's a heavy burden, this responsibility, but it's also a source of strength, a reason to keep fighting. The relentless pace of work leaves no room for thought, only for survival. Your mind becomes a blur of repetitive motions, your body a tool to be used until it breaks. The foreman stalks the aisles, his eyes sharp, his stick ready to prod or strike. There's no sick leave, no holidays, no concept of workers' rights. If you can't work, you don't eat. It's that simple. And if you're injured, you're often simply replaced. Another nameless face swallowed by the insatiable appetite of industry. It's like the factory owners had a human resources department that consisted solely of a revolving door and a giant "Next" sign. As the day wears on and the long shadows begin to stretch across the grimy streets, you guide the child back towards the lodging house. Their small hand feels heavy in yours, their steps dragging with exhaustion. You know that tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, the cold, the hunger, the relentless work. But for tonight, there is the promise of a few hours of restless sleep, a brief respite from the harsh realities of their young lives. As the day wears on, the light outside fades, but the work continues under the flickering gas lamps, casting long, dancing shadows that make the machinery seem even more monstrous. The air grows heavier, hotter, more suffocating. Your muscles scream in protest, your head throbs, and a dull ache settles deep in your bones. You watch the clock, if there is one visible, with a desperate longing, counting down the minutes until your shift finally ends. But even when it does, the exhaustion is so profound that the thought of the long walk home, the crowded lodging house, and the prospect of another identical day tomorrow fills you with a weary dread. You tuck them into their shared straw mattress, pulling the thin blanket up to their chin. You watch their small chest rise and fall with each breath, a fragile testament to their endurance. Their dreams, you hope, are filled with something other than hunger and fear. You pray for their safety, for their future, even as you know how slim their chances are in this unforgiving world. The sounds of the lodging house settle around you, a lullaby of misery and survival. The academic debate still rages among historians regarding the true impact of the factory system on the overall health and lifespan of the working class. While some argue that improved nutrition and sanitation, albeit slow, eventually led to better health outcomes. Others point to the devastating effects of industrial diseases, pollution, and accidents, suggesting a net negative impact for many. It's a complex picture, and one that can't be easily painted with broad strokes. The chill of the London night, thick with the pervasive smell of soot and damp, offers little comfort as you make your way through the labyrinthine alleys. Your body aches, your stomach growls, and the weariness in your bones is a constant companion. But as the gas lamps flicker dimly, casting long, distorted shadows, you become acutely aware of another layer to the city's grim reality, the pervasive shadow of crime. It's not just the grand, sensationalized crimes whispered about in the newspapers of the wealthy. It's the everyday, desperate acts born of poverty, the constant struggle for survival that pushes many to the very edges of legality. Finally, the whistle blows again, a different sound this time, a signal of release. You stumble out into the night, the cold air a shock after the heat of the factory. The fog has thickened, and the gas lamps cast halos of dim light, making the streets seem even more labyrinthine and dangerous. You're too tired to feel much beyond a dull, aching emptiness. The thought of food, of rest, is all that occupies your mind. You join the weary procession heading back to the slums. Another day survived, another day closer to what you don't know. You just keep walking. You walk with a practiced caution, your eyes scanning the darkened doorways and the murky corners where figures lurk. You know the unspoken rules of these streets avoid eye contact. Keep your few precious coins hidden deep in a pocket, and never linger in places that feel too quiet or too dark. The threat isn't always overt. Sometimes it's just a silent, watchful presence, a sense of being observed, a chilling reminder that desperation can turn even the most ordinary person into a predator. It's like a real-life game of stealth. But the stakes are your last shilling. The night air bites, colder than the damp chill of your shared room. But at least here, outside the factory gates, the roar of machinery has faded to a distant hum. You shuffle along with the throng, your boots squelching in the ever-present mud, your shoulders hunched against the biting wind. The gas lamps, few and far between in these poorer districts, cast long, distorted shadows that dance like malevolent spirits ahead of you. Every step is an effort, your body protesting the day's relentless labor. But the thought of a brief respite, however miserable, propels you forward. For many, crime isn't a choice born of malice, but a desperate necessity. You see the young boys, no older than the child you guided home, darting through the crowds, their nimble fingers expertly picking pockets. They are the street Arabs, as they are sometimes called, living by their wits, stealing to eat. Their lives a constant game of cat and mouse with the police. They learn quickly, or they don't survive. You might feel a pang of pity, or perhaps a flicker of recognition, knowing that but for a twist of fate, you could be one of them. As you navigate the labyrinthine alleys, the smells intensify. The acrid tang of coal smoke is now joined by the pervasive stench of human waste, rotting food, and stagnant water. It's a smell that clings to your clothes, seeps into your skin, and seems to permeate the very fabric of your existence. You pass by overflowing privies, little more than wooden boxes over cesspits, their contents often seeping into the narrow pathways. The air is thick with flies, even in the chill of the evening, drawn to the abundant filth. It's a constant reminder of the unsanitary conditions that define your daily life. You can almost taste the disease in the air. A constant, low-level hum of dread. The pickpockets are everywhere, especially in crowded markets or at factory gates during shift changes. They work quickly, silently. Their victims often unaware until long after their meager earnings are gone. You learn to keep your hands over your pockets, to press your few coins tightly against your palm, a small, futile defense against the constant threat. Losing your wages means a day, perhaps two, of starvation, a terrifying prospect that keeps you perpetually vigilant. You finally turn down a particularly narrow, unlit lane, the walls of the tenements on either side almost touching overhead, creating a perpetual twilight. This is where you live, or rather, where you exist. The building looms before you, a hulking, soot-blackened structure that once might have been a grander house, now subdivided countless times, each room a universe of its own misery. The windows are dark, many broken and stuffed with rags or cardboard, offering no glimpse into the lives within. The front door, if it ever had one, is long gone, leaving a gaping maw that leads into a perpetually damp and echoing hallway. It's less a home and more a human filing cabinet. A common historical fact is that petty theft, such as pickpocketing and shoplifting, was incredibly widespread in Victorian London, driven by extreme poverty. The sheer volume of people living in destitution meant that many resorted to crime simply to survive, leading to overcrowded prisons and a constant struggle for law enforcement. Inside, the air is even more oppressive. The hallway is a treacherous obstacle course of discarded rubbish, broken furniture, and sleeping figures huddled against the walls. The faint glow from a single sputtering candle in a distant room offers little illumination. You navigate by touch, your hand trailing along the rough, peeling plaster, feeling the dampness seep through your worn gloves. The sounds are a constant symphony of urban poverty, the distant cries of a baby, the muffled shouts of an argument, the incessant scratching of rats behind the walls. You've learned to tune most of it out, to create a mental barrier against the relentless assault on your senses. Then there are the fences, the shadowy figures who buy stolen goods for a fraction of their worth. They operate out of dimly lit shops or hidden back rooms, their faces obscured by the gloom. They are the essential link in the chain of survival for many petty criminals, turning stolen bread into a few pennies, or a snatched watch into a night's lodging. You might even know some of them, or at least know where to find them, should desperation ever push you to that point. Your room, on the third floor, is up a set of creaking, splintered stairs that threaten to give way with every step. The banister is long gone, ripped away for firewood or simply disintegrated from neglect. You push open the door to your shared space, a room that feels smaller than it did this morning, if that's even possible. It's perhaps 10 feet by 12 feet, and tonight it's home to you and 6 other souls. 3 straw mattresses are laid out on the floor, each shared by 2 people. There's no furniture, save for a rickety wooden crate that serves as a communal table for the few possessions each person owns. One particularly obscure detail about Victorian crime was the prevalence of body snatching, or resurrection men. These individuals would dig up recently buried corpses and sell them to medical schools for dissection, as there was a severe shortage of cadavers for anatomical study. This gruesome trade, often carried out under the cover of darkness, was highly profitable and preyed on the fears of the poor, who could not afford secure burials. Imagine waking up to the thought that your loved one's body might be stolen for science. Not exactly a comforting thought. As you enter, you see the other occupants already settling in. A young couple, barely out of their teens, huddled together on one mattress, whispering. An older woman, her face a road map of hardship, is already asleep. Her snores a rasping counterpoint to the creaking building. 2 men, dock workers by the looks of them, are sharing the third mattress, their heavy boots still on, their faces grim. You nod a silent greeting, a gesture of mutual recognition in this shared purgatorium. There's no need for words. Everyone understands the unspoken rules of this existence. Keep to yourself. Make as little noise as possible and try to find a sliver of peace in the chaos. It's like a very, very depressing slumber party. The public houses, or pubs, offer a brief escape from the cold and the hunger. But they are also breeding grounds for crime. Here, flash houses or boozing kens are frequented by thieves, prostitutes, and other members of the criminal underworld. You might stop for a moment, drawn by the warmth and the faint sound of music, but you know to keep your distance. Arguments often erupt, sometimes escalating into violent brawls, fueled by cheap gin and desperation. It's like a real-life bar fight, but with more top hats and less dental care. A common historical fact about Victorian housing for the poor is the sheer density of occupation. It was not uncommon for multiple families, sometimes as many as 10 to 15 people, to share a single room, often with no access to basic sanitation or clean water. These rookeries or slums were breeding grounds for disease and crime, a stark contrast to the burgeoning wealth of the middle and upper classes. This extreme overcrowding was a direct consequence of rapid industrialization and urbanization, which drew vast numbers of people to cities faster than adequate housing could be built. Prostitution, for many women and even some children, is another grim reality. Driven by extreme poverty and lack of other opportunities, they walk the streets, their faces painted, their eyes hollow. They are vulnerable, exploited, and constantly at risk of violence and disease. You see them, shivering in doorways, their voices hoarse from calling out to passers-by, and you understand the desperation that has led them to such a life. It's a stark reminder of the limited choices available to women in this harsh society. Privacy, as you know, is a luxury you cannot afford. Every sound, every movement, every breath taken by your roommates is audible, sometimes even felt. You learn to sleep through the coughing fits, the whispered arguments, the occasional cries of children from neighboring rooms. Your dreams, come when they come, are often fragmented and restless, filled with the echoes of the day's labor and the anxieties of tomorrow. There's no escape, not even in sleep. It's like living in a human sardine can, but the sardines are all very tired and occasionally smelly. The academic debate still continues regarding the extent to which Victorian policing, particularly the rise of the bobbies or metropolitan police, truly deterred crime among the poor, or simply displaced it to less visible areas. Some historians argue that the police were more focused on maintaining social order and suppressing dissent than on addressing the root causes of crime, while others credit them with bringing a degree of stability to the chaotic urban environment. One particularly obscure detail about these lodging houses was the practice of hot bedding, where beds were rented out in shifts, sometimes 2 or even 3 times in a 24-hour period. As soon as one occupant left for their shift, another would immediately take their place, meaning the straw mattresses were rarely, if ever, allowed to cool or air out. This contributed significantly to the spread of disease and the general squalor of the living conditions. Imagine crawling into a bed still warm from a stranger's body, knowing that another stranger will be taking your place in a few hours. It's a truly unsettling thought. For those who are caught, the consequences are severe. The Victorian justice system is harsh and unforgiving, especially for the poor. A minor theft could lead to a lengthy prison sentence, or even transportation to the penal colonies in Australia. Prisons are brutal places, overcrowded and unsanitary, where disease is rampant and the discipline is relentless. You live in constant fear of being caught, of being dragged away from the meager life you've managed to carve out for yourself. The lack of sanitation is perhaps the most immediate and dangerous aspect of your living situation. There are no toilets inside the building. Instead, a few shared privies are located in the communal yard, often overflowing and rarely cleaned. The stench is unbearable and the risk of disease is constant. Water for drinking and washing must be fetched from a communal pump, often shared by hundreds of people, and the water itself is frequently contaminated. Cholera, typhoid, and smallpox are not abstract threats. They are ever-present dangers, lurking in every drop of water and every breath of air. You've seen neighbors succumb to these illnesses, their bodies wasted away in a matter of days, their families left with nothing but grief and more debt. The workhouse, as you remember, is another form of punishment, a place designed to deter the poor from seeking public assistance. While not strictly a prison, its harsh conditions, forced labor, and the separation of families make it a dreaded destination. Many resort to crime rather than face the humiliation and degradation of the workhouse. It's a constant tightrope walk between starvation, crime, and the ultimate loss of freedom. Even the simple act of eating is a public affair. If you manage to scrounge together a few pence for a piece of bread or a watery soup, you eat it quickly, hunched over, acutely aware of the hungry eyes around you. There's no kitchen, No place to prepare food beyond a shared, smoky fire pit in the yard. If you're lucky enough to have access to one, most meals are eaten cold or purchased from street vendors, offering little in the way of nutrition. The constant hunger pangs are a familiar ache, a dull throb in your stomach that never truly goes away. Sometimes, you witness acts of violence. A drunken brawl in an alley, a desperate robbery gone wrong, a domestic dispute spilling out onto the street. The screams are quickly muffled by the city's constant hum, and bystanders often look away, unwilling to get involved, knowing that intervention could put their own lives at risk. You learn to keep your head down, to walk quickly, to pretend you haven't seen anything. Survival depends on it. The walls of your room are thin, barely offering any insulation from the elements. In winter, the cold seeps in, chilling you to the bone. In summer, the heat is stifling, making sleep almost impossible. Rain often finds its way through cracks in the roof or around the ill-fitting windows, leaving damp patches on the walls and floor. The air is always heavy with moisture, contributing to the pervasive smell of mildew and decay. It's a constant battle against the elements, a fight you rarely win. The criminal underworld has its own hierarchy, its own unspoken codes. Gangs control certain territories, extorting money from street vendors and small businesses, or organizing larger heists. You try to stay clear of them, knowing that entanglement with such groups can lead to far greater dangers than simple hunger. They offer a twisted form of protection, but at a price that few can truly afford. It's like a very exclusive, very dangerous club, and the membership fees are your kneecaps. The academic debate still continues regarding the effectiveness of early Victorian public health reforms in improving the living conditions of the urban poor. While significant strides were made in understanding disease transmission and implementing some sanitation measures, many historians argue that these efforts were too slow, too piecemeal, and often resisted by vested interests, leading to continued suffering for decades. It's a question of whether the glass was half empty or half full, but for those living in the slums, it often felt completely empty. Even children are not immune to the harsh realities of the justice system. Child offenders are often treated with the same severity as adults, imprisoned in grim reformatories or sent to industrial schools designed to rehabilitate them through hard labor and strict discipline. Their young lives are scarred by these experiences, often leading to a lifelong cycle of crime and incarceration. Despite the squalor, there are moments of fleeting human connection. A shared glance of understanding with a fellow lodger, a quiet word of comfort, a brief moment of laughter over a shared, simple joke. These are the tiny sparks of humanity that flicker in the overwhelming darkness, reminders that even in the most dehumanizing conditions, the human spirit finds ways to endure. You might share a story, a rumor from the factory, or a fleeting hope for a better tomorrow, even if you know, deep down, that such hopes are often just dreams. The fear of crime is not just about being a victim, it's also about the constant temptation to commit it. When hunger gnaws, when your family is starving, when every legitimate avenue is closed off, the allure of a quick, illicit gain can be overwhelming. You fight against it, against the desperation that whispers in your ear, urging you to take what you need, no matter the cost. It's a constant moral battle, fought in the depths of your own conscience. The children in these lodging houses grow up fast. They learn to navigate the dangerous streets, to scavenge for food, and to avoid the watchful eyes of the authorities. Their playground is the alleyway. Their toys are discarded scraps, and their education comes from the harsh lessons of survival. They are often sent out to work at incredibly young ages, their innocence stripped away long before their bodies have fully formed. You see them, small figures disappearing into the morning fog, heading to their own arduous labors, and you feel a pang of something akin to despair, knowing that their future is likely a mirror of your own present. As you finally reach the relative safety of your lodging house, the sounds of the street fade, replaced by the familiar creaks and murmurs of the building. You collapse onto your straw mattress, your body aching, your mind still replaying the sights and sounds of the night. The shadow of crime, like the pervasive smog, is a constant presence in your life, a grim reminder of the desperate measures people take to survive in this unforgiving world. As the night deepens, the sounds from outside gradually subside, replaced by the more intimate noises of the lodging house, the creaking of floorboards, the soft murmurs of sleep, the occasional cough. You close your eyes, trying to block out the dim light filtering in from the hallway, and the constant awareness of the bodies pressed close around you. Sleep is a precious commodity, hard-won and rarely deep. You drift in and out of consciousness, your mind still replaying the day's events, your body aching. You yearn for the oblivion of true sleep, for a few hours of escape from the harsh realities of your existence. You close your eyes, trying to find sleep. But the images of the street, the faces of the desperate, the whispers of illicit dealings, still haunt your thoughts. You pray for safety, for yourself and for those around you, knowing that in this city, the line between victim and perpetrator is often thin, blurred by the relentless pressure of poverty. You survive, day by day, not just the hunger and the labor, but also the ever-present threat of the criminal underworld. This is your home. This is your sanctuary. It's a place of constant discomfort, a breeding ground for disease, and a stark reminder of your place in the rigid social hierarchy of Victorian England. But it is also, paradoxically, a place of community, of shared struggle, and of the quiet, unyielding resilience of the human spirit. You survive day by day, hour by hour, in these cramped, damp, and often terrifying spaces, clinging to the hope that tomorrow, somehow, might be just a little bit better. You're not just living, you're enduring. And that, in itself, is a triumph. The relentless grind of work, the gnawing hunger, the pervasive threat of disease, and the lurking shadow of crime are the constant companions of your Victorian life. Yet, even in this bleak existence, amidst the squalor and despair, there are fleeting moments, brief glimpses of light, where the human spirit finds a way to seek out joy, however simple, however ephemeral. As you emerge from the factory gates, your body aching and your mind weary, you don't always head straight back to the damp confines of your lodging house. Sometimes, just sometimes, you allow yourself a small detour, a brief indulgence, a moment of respite from the relentless struggle, the faint light of dawn. If it can even be called light through the perpetual London smog, begins to filter into your cramped room. Your body, still aching from yesterday's relentless toil, protests every movement as you stir on the straw mattress. The cold, persistent and unforgiving, seems to have seeped into your very bones overnight. You can hear the rustling of your bedmates, the soft coughs, the resigned sighs that mark the beginning of another day. There's no luxury of a slow awakening. The city and the demands of survival are already calling. The streets, even in the poor districts, are not entirely devoid of life beyond the grim necessities. On a Saturday evening, perhaps, or a rare Sunday afternoon when work is momentarily suspended, a different kind of energy stirs. The air, though still thick with soot, seems to carry a faint echo of laughter, a distant snatch of music, a murmur of conversation that isn't about survival. You might find yourself drawn towards a street corner where a small crowd has gathered, their faces, though tired, showing a flicker of amusement. You push yourself up, the straw crunching beneath you, and pull on your grimy clothes. They are still damp from the pervasive moisture of the lodging house, and the familiar scent of soot and stale air clings to them. There's no hot water for washing, no time for a proper clean. A quick splash of icy water from the communal pump on your face, if you're lucky enough to get a turn, is all you can manage. The thought of food, a gnawing emptiness in your stomach, is already present, but you know it will have to wait. The factory whistle, a distant, mournful shriek, serves as your alarm clock, a stark reminder that time for you is measured in shifts and survival. Here, a street performer might be holding court. Perhaps a Punch and Judy show, with its raucous slapstick violence and crude humor, draws gasps and giggles from the children, and even a wry smile from the adults. The puppeteer, his voice hoarse from years of shouting, manipulates the wooden figures with practiced ease, their exaggerated movements a welcome distraction from the grim realities of life. Or perhaps a ballad singer, his voice thin but earnest, croons a mournful tune about lost love or a heroic deed, drawing a few coppers from sympathetic listeners. These are the unsung entertainers of the slums, providing a brief, affordable escape into a world of fantasy and storytelling. It's like watching a really low-budget live-action cartoon, but it's free. Stepping out into the alley? The pea super fog is back, thicker than ever. a yellowish-gray blanket that muffles sound and obscures vision. It tastes metallic, a mix of coal dust and something indefinable, something that makes your lungs ache with every breath. You join the silent procession of figures, all heading in the same direction, towards the industrial heart of this sprawling, unforgiving city. The cobblestones are slick with dampness and grime, and the air is heavy with the stench of open sewers and decaying refuse. This is your morning commute, a daily descent into the belly of the beast. A common historical fact is that despite the harsh conditions, entertainment for the Victorian poor was surprisingly diverse and accessible. Public houses, music halls, street performers, and even simple games and communal gatherings provided much-needed relief from the monotony and hardship of daily life. You arrive at the factory gates, a towering brick edifice that seems to swallow people whole. The noise inside is already a deafening roar. The rhythmic clatter of looms, the hiss of steam, the shouts of foremen. The air is thick with cotton dust, a fine, almost invisible powder that coats your tongue and settles in your throat. You know, with a grim certainty, that this dust is slowly eroding your health. But the alternative is starvation. You step onto the factory floor, and your shift begins, not with a friendly greeting, but with the immediate, demanding rhythm of the machines. The public house, or pub, is often the most accessible form of entertainment, especially for men. After a long, arduous week, a few pence might buy you a pint of ale, thin and watery, but enough to dull the edges of your exhaustion. The warmth of the fire, the camaraderie of fellow workers, the low hum of conversation, these are small comforts. Here, you might share stories, complain about the foreman, or discuss the latest news, often gleaned from a shared, well-worn newspaper. The pub is a social hub, a place where you can feel a sense of belonging, however fleeting, in a world that often feels utterly indifferent to your existence. If you are a woman, you might be a piecer in a textile mill, your small, nimble fingers constantly darting in and out of the whirring machinery, mending broken threads. The work is monotonous, repetitive, and requires absolute concentration. A moment's lapse, a flicker of fatigue, could mean a finger caught, a hand crushed. The noise is so intense that shouting is the only way to communicate. And even then, it's a struggle to be heard. The air is hot and humid, designed to keep the cotton pliable, but it makes breathing difficult, especially with the constant inhalation of cotton fibers. Your eyes sting from the poor light and the constant strain, and your back aches from standing for hours on end. It's like playing a never-ending, high-stakes game of Twister, but with the added bonus of losing a limb if you mess up. One particularly obscure detail about Victorian pub culture was the prevalence of penny gaffes, impromptu, often illegal, theatrical performances held in rented rooms or backyards, costing just a penny to enter. These shows were crude and often bawdy, featuring short plays, songs, and novelty acts, providing cheap entertainment for the working class. Imagine a pop-up theater in a back alley, complete with questionable acting and even more questionable hygiene. For men, the work might be even more physically demanding and dangerous. Perhaps you are a coal heaver at the docks, shoveling tons of coal from ships onto barges, your muscles screaming with every scoop. The dust is suffocating, coating your skin, hair, and clothes in a thick black layer. Your lungs burn with every breath, and the constant strain on your back and shoulders is immense. The work is relentless, driven by the tides and the demands of commerce. Or perhaps you are a navvy, building the new railways that crisscross the country, digging canals or laying tracks. This involves back-breaking manual labor, often with primitive tools, in all weathers. Accidents are common, and injuries are a daily occurrence. A broken bone, a deep cut, could mean the end of your working life, and with it, the end of your ability to feed yourself or your family. For children, entertainment is often found in the simplest things. A discarded hoop and stick become a thrilling game. Chased through the narrow alleys, a piece of string can be transformed into a complex cat's cradle. Sharing stories, playing tag, or simply watching the bustling street life unfold. These are their forms of play. Despite the constant pressure to work, children find moments to be children. Their laughter, though often thin and quickly suppressed, a defiant sound against the backdrop of their harsh lives. It's a bit like finding joy in a cardboard box, but the box is also your entire world. A common historical fact is that the average working day in Victorian factories and mines could easily stretch to 12 to 16 hours. 6 days a week, with minimal breaks. There was no concept of a weekend as we know it, and holidays were practically non-existent. This relentless schedule left workers perpetually exhausted and with little time for anything beyond work and a brief, restless sleep. Music halls, though often a step up in price, offered a more structured form of entertainment. If you managed to save a few extra pennies, you might treat yourself to an evening at a local hall, where singers, comedians, and variety acts performed. The atmosphere is boisterous, filled with the smell of beer and tobacco, and the roar of the crowd. It's a chance to forget your troubles for a few hours, to sing along to a catchy tune, or to laugh at a comedian's jokes, however crude. These halls were the precursors to modern-day stand-up comedy and concert venues, offering a vibrant, if sometimes rough, cultural outlet. The foreman, a hulking figure with a stern gaze and a ready stick, patrols the aisles, his presence a constant reminder of the precariousness of your position. He doesn't care about your fatigue, your hunger, or your aching body. He cares only about production, about keeping the machines running, about meeting quotas. A moment of slacking, a perceived inefficiency, and his sharp tongue, or worse, his heavy hand, will remind you of your place. There's no union to protect you, no one to advocate for your rights. You're a cog in a vast industrial machine, easily replaced if you break down. The academic debate still continues regarding the true role of leisure and entertainment in the lives of the Victorian poor. Some historians argue that these activities were crucial for maintaining morale and fostering community spirit, while others contend that they often served as a distraction from the underlying social injustices and provided only temporary relief from systemic poverty. Was it a genuine escape, or just a temporary bandage? Lunch, when it finally comes, is a brief, hurried affair. You might have brought a piece of stale bread, perhaps a sliver of cheese if you were fortunate enough to afford it. You eat quickly, hunched over, your eyes still on the machinery, ready to spring back into action at a moment's notice. There's no designated lunchroom, no comfortable break area. You simply find a quiet corner, away from the immediate danger of the machines, and wolf down your meager meal. The taste of the food is often secondary to the simple act of putting anything, into your empty stomach. It's like a competitive eating contest, but the prize is just not starving. Gambling, though often illegal, is another pervasive form of entertainment. Street corner games of 3-card monte or dice rolls offer a tantalizing, if dangerous, chance to win a few shillings. The stakes are high and the risks are immense. But the allure of a quick fortune, however unlikely, is a powerful draw for those with nothing to lose. You might watch from a distance, drawn by the tension and the shouts of the players, or perhaps, in a moment of desperate hope, you might even risk a few of your own hard-earned pennies. One particularly obscure detail about factory life was the use of wages in kind, or the truck system, where workers were sometimes paid not in money, but in goods from a company shop, often at inflated prices. This system effectively trapped workers in a cycle of debt and dependence, as they were forced to buy necessities from their employer, further eroding their already meager earnings. It was a subtle, yet insidious form of exploitation that kept the poor firmly in their place. For those with a rare moment of peace and a few coppers to spare, the penny dreadfuls offer a thrilling escape. These cheap, sensationalized, serialized stories, often featuring tales of crime, adventure, and the supernatural, are devoured by the working class. You might huddle under a dim gas lamp, or share a single copy with friends, each person taking turns to read aloud, transported to a world far removed from the grim reality of your own. It's like binge-watching a really dramatic TV show, but on paper. The afternoon shift drags on in an endless cycle of repetitive motions and physical strain. Your muscles burn, your eyes blur, and your mind struggles to stay alert. The air grows heavier, filled with the accumulated dust and heat of the day. The noise, once a deafening roar, now seems to blend into a dull, persistent ache in your ears. You might find yourself drifting, your thoughts wandering to a fleeting memory of childhood, a moment of warmth or laughter, before the harsh reality of your surroundings snaps you back to attention. Religious services, for some, offer a different kind of solace. The Salvation Army, with its brass bands and impassioned sermons, provides not only spiritual comfort but also practical aid, such as soup kitchens and temporary shelters. For others, attending a local church or chapel offers a sense of community, a moment of reflection, and the hope of a better life in the hereafter. It's a place where you are treated with a semblance of dignity, regardless of your social standing. Accidents are not uncommon. You've seen them: a finger crushed, an arm caught in the gears, a body mangled by falling machinery. There's no compensation, no sick pay, no support for the injured. If you're lucky, a fellow worker might help you. Staunch the bleeding, but you know that once you're out of commission, you're on your own. The factory owners bear no responsibility. It's always the worker's fault. A moment of carelessness, a failure to be vigilant. This constant threat of injury hangs over you like a dark cloud, adding another layer of anxiety to your already difficult existence. It's a bit like a game of Jenga. But if you pull the wrong block, you lose your hand instead of just the game. Even simple pleasures provide a profound sense of relief. A warm cup of tea, if you can afford the tea leaves and the fuel to boil water, is a comforting ritual. The simple act of sitting down, even on a hard floor, and sipping something warm can feel like an immense luxury. Or perhaps a moment spent watching the boats on the Thames, their sails billowing, their cargoes hinting at distant lands. These are small, stolen moments of peace, brief respites from the relentless demands of survival. The academic debate still continues regarding the extent to which Victorian industrialists were aware of, or actively ignored, the devastating health impacts of factory work on their employees. While some argue that ignorance of germ theory and industrial hazards was widespread, others contend that the pursuit of profit often overshadowed any concern for worker welfare, leading to a deliberate disregard for safety. Sometimes, the entertainment is found in communal gatherings. A street fair, though rare and often quickly dispersed by authorities, brings a burst of color and excitement to the drab streets. Jugglers, acrobats, and strongmen might perform, drawing gasps of wonder from the crowds. The smell of roasted chestnuts or fried fish, though often beyond your budget, adds to the festive atmosphere. These are rare carnivals of the poor, moments when the weight of existence is momentarily lifted. Children, as you remember from the morning, are an integral part of the workforce. Small hands are ideal for reaching into intricate machinery or for crawling into tight spaces in mines. They work the same long hours as adults, often for a fraction of the pay. Their bodies, still developing, are particularly vulnerable to the physical strain and the toxic environment. You see them, their faces smudged with dirt, their eyes wide with exhaustion, and you feel a pang of sorrow for their lost childhoods. They are robbed of education, of play, of any semblance of innocence. Their future is predetermined, a continuation of the same cycle of poverty and labor that has trapped generations before them. The resilience of the human spirit is truly remarkable. Despite the overwhelming hardships, people find ways to laugh, to connect, to create moments of joy. These aren't grand celebrations, but rather small, defiant acts of humanity against a world that seems determined to crush it. You learn to cherish these moments, to hold on to them, for they are the fuel that keeps you going through the long, dark days. The end of the shift is a moment of profound relief, a release from the relentless demands of the factory. You stumble out into the evening air, which, despite the smog, feels fresh after the oppressive atmosphere inside. Your body aches in places you didn't even know existed, and your mind is numb with fatigue. You join the stream of workers heading back to the slums, each step a testament to your endurance. The thought of a few hours of uneasy sleep is the only thing that keeps you going, as the evening draws to a close, and the street performers pack up their meager props. You make your way back to the lodging house. The laughter and music fade behind you, replaced by the familiar sounds of the city settling into its uneasy sleep. The brief escape is over, and the realities of your life once again press in. But the memory of that shared laugh, that catchy tune, that moment of fleeting joy lingers. It's a small spark, but it's enough to carry you through until the next time. Even outside the factory, the work of survival continues. Perhaps you pick up odd jobs, running errands for a few extra pence, or scavenging for anything useful in the gutters. Every penny counts. Every scrap of food is a victory. The struggle is constant, a relentless grind that leaves little room for hope or ambition. Your world shrinks to the immediate needs of food, shelter, and the avoidance of disease. You lie down on your straw mattress. The sounds of your bedmates a familiar lullaby. The hunger is still there. The cold still bites. But for a moment, your mind drifts back to the Punch and Judy show, or the lively music hall. You smile faintly in the darkness. These moments, however rare, however simple, are what make life bearable. They are the proof that even in the bleakest of times, humanity finds a way to sing, to dance, to laugh, and to dream. The cycle repeats, day after day, week after week. There's no escape, no upward mobility for most. You are born into this life, and you will likely die in it. The dream of a better future, of escaping the slums, is a distant, almost laughable fantasy. Yet, amidst the despair, there is a quiet resilience. You learn to find small moments of joy, a shared laugh with a friend, a warm fire on a cold night, a simple act of surviving another day. These tiny victories are what keep you going, what prevent you from succumbing to the overwhelming weight of your circumstances. After the rare moments of joy, you're back in the grim reality of the slums. Hunger still gnaws, cold still stings, and the darkness of disease and crime still looms. Yet even in the deepest despair, you begin to see glimmers of hope. Efforts, however small, to resist the brutality of life, and acts of kindness, however rare, to alleviate the suffering of your fellow human beings. This is a story of charity and resistance, the seeds of change that sprout in the heart of a harsh society. You remember the talk of progress and empire that you sometimes hear from the pulpits or read about in discarded newspapers? The great achievements of the age, the grand buildings, the technological marvels, they are built on the backs of people like you. You are the invisible foundation of Victorian prosperity, the silent engine of its power. Your suffering fuels their progress. Your poverty underpins their wealth. And as you finally collapse onto your straw mattress, the sounds of the lodging house settling around you, you know that tomorrow, the cycle will begin anew. You have heard of the philanthropists, wealthy ladies in plumed hats and silk robes, who sometimes visit the slums with baskets of food or old clothes. They usually carry looks of pity and a little fear, and their visits are usually brief and formal. Sometimes, however, a genuine act of kindness, a warm word, or a small gift can bring some comfort. You realize that for them it may be a social obligation, but for you, it is a rare glimmer of recognition. The relentless ache in your muscles is a constant companion as you stumble back to the lodging house. The dim gas lamps doing little to dispel the oppressive gloom of the London night. Your stomach, a hollow pit of hunger, churns with anticipation, a desperate hope for even a morsel of food. You've been working since before dawn, your body pushed to its limits, and the only thing that truly matters now is the promise of something, anything, to quiet the gnawing emptiness within. It is a well-known historical fact that private charity played an important role in providing relief to the poor in Victorian England, especially before the advent of a comprehensive social welfare system. Religious organizations, wealthy individuals, and charitable associations established soup kitchens, temporary housing, and schools for poor children. As you navigate the familiar, stench-filled alleys, the faint aroma of cooked food occasionally wafts from a distant public house or a more prosperous street. It's a cruel tease, a reminder of what you cannot have. Your mouth waters instinctively, even as your mind knows that such luxuries are far beyond your reach. You pass by a baker's shop, its window displaying rows of golden brown loaves, and you press your face against the cold glass for a moment, inhaling the warm, yeasty scent, a fleeting comfort in the biting cold. It's a bit like window shopping for a feast when all you have is a single farthing. However, more significant efforts came from people who truly understood your pain. You saw women, often those who had experienced poverty, volunteering to open small soup kitchens in dark alleys. The smell of hot soup, though thin and meatless, was a wonderful scent in the bitter cold. You stand in long lines, patiently waiting your turn. And when you receive a bowl of warm soup, it is a small victory, a moment of nourishment not just from food, but from kindness. It is like a Michelin feast, but with fewer stars and more water. Back in your cramped room, the air is heavy with the stale smells of unwashed bodies and damp straw. Your bedmates are already settling in, their own faces etched with the same weariness and hunger that gnaws at you. There's no communal meal, no shared table laden with food. Each person is responsible for their own sustenance, a lonely, desperate hunt for calories. You reach into your pocket, your fingers closing around the few pence you managed to earn today. It's barely enough, but it's something. You also know about the Salvation Army, a religious organization that emerged in the mid-19th century, bringing not only a spiritual message of hope, but also practical help. You have seen their brass bands playing on street corners, hymns echoing through the fog, and their soldiers, in simple uniforms, handing out hot sandwiches and tea to the homeless. They do not judge. They just help. And their presence is a great comfort in areas that are often overlooked by the authorities. A unique or little-known detail is the development of friendly societies among the working class. These were self-help organizations established by the poor themselves, where members contributed small amounts of money regularly to create a common fund. This fund was then used to provide financial support to members when they were sick, injured, or to pay for funeral expenses. It was a primitive form of social insurance, built from the bottom up, demonstrating a sense of community and solidarity in adversity. Your first thought is always bread. It's the staple, the most basic form of sustenance, and often the cheapest. You might venture out again, despite your exhaustion, to a local baker who sells day-old loaves at a reduced price, or to a street vendor hawking stale crusts. The bread is often hard, sometimes moldy, but it's food. You break off a piece, the dry, crumbly texture a familiar sensation in your mouth, and chew slowly, trying to make it last, trying to trick your stomach into feeling full. It's a far cry from the fluffy loaves you might imagine. This is dense, heavy, and often barely palatable. In addition to charity, there was another form of resistance, quieter but more powerful, the solidarity of the poor themselves. You saw neighbors helping each other, sharing a little coal, a piece of bread, or a word of comfort. When a family fell ill, others would try to care for them, even though they themselves were not well off. This was not charity from above, but mutual aid from those who knew each other's pain best. It was like a safety net, but woven with the thinnest threads of empathy. A common historical fact is that for the poorest Victorians, bread, often made from cheaper, unrefined flour and sometimes adulterated with chalk or sawdust, formed the vast majority of their diet. Meat was a rare luxury, and fresh vegetables were often inaccessible or too expensive. Their diet was severely lacking in essential nutrients, leading to widespread malnutrition. You've also heard stories of strikes, small-scale uprisings by workers against poor working conditions and low wages. Although often brutally suppressed by police or military, and participants often faced dismissal and starvation, these strikes were the first voices of organized resistance. They were declarations that workers would no longer accept exploitation in silence. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you might find a vendor selling penny pies. These are small, often mystery meat-filled pastries, whose contents are best left unquestioned. The crust is usually greasy, the filling a dubious mixture of scraps and gristle, but it's hot, and it offers a momentary illusion of a proper meal. You eat it quickly, standing in the street, trying to ignore the lingering aftertaste and the vague suspicion that you might regret it later. It's like a culinary game of Russian roulette, where the worst outcome is just a really bad stomach ache. Historians still debate whether the social reforms and labor laws passed in the late Victorian period were the result of pressure from social movements from below, or were primarily the result of enlightened legislators and the upper classes. It is difficult to determine which factors actually drove the change. For those with even less, scavenging is a daily necessity. You might spend hours sifting through the refuse of richer districts, hoping to find discarded scraps of food, bruised fruit, or even bones with a bit of marrow left. This is the realm of the mudlarks and rag pickers, children and adults who scour the banks of the Thames at low tide or pick through rubbish heaps, hoping to find anything of value, edible or otherwise. It's a humiliating existence, but hunger overrides pride. You learn to ignore the stares, the sneers, and the constant threat of disease from the putrid waste. The rise of social reform movements, fueled by thinkers such as Charles Dickens through his literary works, and reformers such as Octavia Hill, a pioneer in public housing, began to draw attention to the plight of the poor. These people not only provided relief, but also sought to address the root causes of poverty, such as poor housing, poor sanitation, and lack of education. Although progress was slow, their efforts sowed the seeds of greater change in the future. The water you drink is often as suspect as the food. The communal pumps, fed by shallow wells or the polluted Thames, are a breeding ground for bacteria. You know the risks. You've seen the cholera outbreak sweep through the slums. But thirst is a powerful master. You gulp down the murky liquid, hoping for the best, knowing that every sip is a gamble with your health. The taste is often earthy, sometimes metallic, and never truly refreshing. Education, while still a luxury for most poor children, also began to be seen as a means of improving their lives. Ragged schools, founded by philanthropists, provided a basic education for children who could not afford to attend school. Although learning conditions were primitive and education was often interrupted by the need to earn a living, they opened a small door for a lucky few, giving them hope for a better future. You also see individual acts of resistance. A woman refuses to work too hard. A man dares to speak out against the abuse of his foreman. A child tries to skip school to read a discarded book. These acts, however small, are expressions of dignity and freedom in a world that tries to strip them away. They are the small sparks that can ignite a larger fire. One particularly obscure detail about the food of the poor was the widespread consumption of offal, the internal organs of animals, which was cheap and often discarded by butchers. Tripe, trotters' pigs' feet, and cow heels were common, boiled for hours to make them palatable. While nutritious, they were often prepared in unsanitary conditions and were a stark reminder of the desperate measures people took to get protein. Imagine the smell of boiling tripe filling your tiny, unventilated room. Not exactly a pleasant bedtime aroma, is it? The growth of trade unions, although initially repressed and secretive, is also an important form of resistance. Workers begin to realize that their strength lies in numbers, and that by uniting they can demand better working conditions and fair wages. Although the road to struggle is long and thorny, these are the first steps toward workers' rights. The constant hunger affects everything. It dulls your senses, slows your movements, and clouds your thoughts. Your body is perpetually running on empty, trying to conserve every ounce of energy. You feel the cold more acutely, the dampness more deeply. Your immune system is weakened, making you more susceptible to the myriad diseases that constantly circulate through the slums. Every cough, every sniffle is a source of anxiety, knowing that a simple cold could quickly escalate into something far more serious when your body has no reserves to fight it. You see flyers posted on walls calling for reform, calling for equality. You hear whispered conversations about new politicians who promise to represent the voices of the poor. Though the cynicism is deep, there is a glimmer of hope that these promises can be fulfilled. This is the beginning of a political consciousness among the working class, a recognition that they have the right to demand a better life. Mealtimes, such as they are solitary affairs. There's no family dinner, no shared conversation over a warm meal. You eat what you can, when you can, often in silence, your thoughts consumed by the relentless struggle for survival. The concept of comfort food is alien. Food is fuel, nothing more, nothing less, and even that fuel is often insufficient, even in the most desperate moments. You sense the resilience of your community. Neighbors share joys and sorrows, supporting each other through the toughest times. A funeral is held with respect. A newborn baby is welcomed with hope. A meal is shared with gratitude. These are small acts of kindness and solidarity, invisible threads that bind you to those around you. The academic debate still continues regarding the exact nutritional intake of the Victorian working class. While some historians use dietary records and food prices to estimate caloric intake, others argue that such data often overlooks the widespread practice of food adulteration and the inconsistent availability of food, making accurate assessments extremely difficult. It's hard to count calories when half of them might be chalk. When you lie down on your straw mattress at night, the sounds of the slum still echo, but now you hear other sounds, too, whispers of hope, voices of resistance, footsteps of change. You know that the road is long and the fight is not over, but you also know that you are not alone. There are people fighting for you, and there are people fighting with you. And in the darkness of the night, that brings some comfort. For children, the hunger is even more acute. Their small, growing bodies require more sustenance, yet they often receive the least. You see them, their bellies distended from malnutrition, their limbs thin and spindly. their eyes dull with perpetual hunger. They might beg on the streets or try to snatch a dropped apple from a market stall, risking a beating for a fleeting taste of sweetness. Their childhoods are defined by this constant, gnawing emptiness, a hunger that shapes their entire existence. The glimmers of charity and resistance you have witnessed have planted the seeds of a slow, almost imperceptible change in your daily life. As you trudge through the familiar streets, the cold is still bitter, the hunger is still gnawing, but now you begin to sense a subtle shift in the air, a fading echo of an era that is slowly closing. It is not a sudden revolution, but a gradual evolution, a whispered promise of a future that could be better. Sometimes, a luxury might present itself. Perhaps a kind stranger offers a penny, or you manage to earn a little extra from an odd job. This might allow you to buy a small portion of fish and chips, wrapped in newspaper, the grease soaking through the pages, the warmth of the fried fish, the soft, starchy potatoes, are a rare treat, a moment of genuine pleasure in an otherwise bleak existence. You savor every bite, the taste a vivid contrast to the usual blandness of your diet. It's a fleeting moment of indulgence, a reminder that life can occasionally offer something more than just survival. You still work long hours in the factory, but maybe, just maybe, the whistle to end your shift now sounds a little earlier, or there are a few more minutes of rest in between. Whispers of factory law and inspection have begun to circulate among the workers. While you know these laws are often ignored or circumvented, their existence is a sign that the workers' voices, however feeble, are beginning to be heard. It's a small change, but for a tired body and a weary mind, every minute of rest counts. But these moments are rare. Most days are a continuous cycle of hunger, work, and the desperate search for enough food to simply keep going. You learn to ignore the pangs, to push through the weakness, to focus on the immediate task at hand. Your body adapts, becoming accustomed to operating on a minimal fuel, but the cost is immense. Your bones ache, your teeth decay, and your hair becomes brittle. The signs of malnutrition are etched onto your very being, a visible testament to the harsh realities of your life. It's a well-known historical fact that the Factory Acts passed during the Victorian era gradually limited the working hours of women and children, banned children under a certain age from working in dangerous industries, and introduced safety regulations. Although enforcement was lax, these were important first steps toward protecting workers. The struggle for food is not just about physical sustenance, it's also a psychological battle. The constant anxiety about where your next meal will come from, the fear of starvation, weighs heavily on your mind. It affects your mood, your interactions, your very outlook on life. Hope becomes a luxury you can rarely afford, replaced by a grim determination to simply endure. It's a bit like being trapped in a never-ending game of hungry, hungry hippos. But the hippos are your own stomach. Public sanitation, once a disgrace, is also undergoing changes. You may notice less litter piled up on the streets, or the smell of sewers is not as strong as it once was. Huge sewers are being built beneath the city, a massive effort to remove waste and provide clean water. Although you still have to get your water from a public pump, the water seems a little clearer, and the fear of cholera no longer haunts you with the same intensity. It's a slow change, but it brings a fragile sense of security. As the night deepens and you finally lie down on your straw mattress, the hunger is still there, a dull throb in your gut. You try to ignore it, to focus on the exhaustion that pulls you towards sleep. You dream of food, of warm, nourishing meals, of a table piled high with abundance. These dreams are both a comfort and a torment, a cruel reminder of the reality you wake up to each morning. But even in your dreams, you know, the food is often just out of reach. You also see changes in the way children are viewed. Although many children still have to work, there are now more schools, even if they are simple rag schools. Instead of selling matches on the streets, you see children learning to read and write in dimly lit rooms. The idea that children have a right to an education, rather than just being a source of labor, is taking root. It's a slow change, but it brings a glimmer of hope for the next generation. It's like realizing that children are not just little machines for making money, but little people. A unique or little-known detail is the rise of penny readings and working men's clubs in the late Victorian period. These were places where workers could gather to listen to readings, discuss social issues, and engage in low-cost educational and recreational activities. They were not only places of entertainment, but also centers of intellectual and political development among the working class. You close your eyes. The sounds of the lodging house a familiar lullaby of misery. The hunger is a part of you now, a constant companion, a silent testament to the life you lead. You have survived another day, another battle against the gnawing emptiness. And as you drift into a fitful sleep, you know that tomorrow, the hunt for sustenance will begin anew. Social movements, once solitary voices in the shadows, were now becoming more powerful and organized. You heard of reformers speaking out in Parliament, of larger marches in the streets, demanding rights for the poor. Trade unions, although still facing opposition, were beginning to gain some power, fighting for fairer wages and safer working conditions. You may feel a new sense of solidarity, a realization that you are not alone in this struggle. The hunger in your stomach is a familiar companion. But there is another fear, more insidious and persistent, that lurks in the shadows of your Victorian life illness. As you trudge home from work after a long day, every cough from a passerby, every dirty puddle, every touch of a public surface carries an invisible threat. There are no clean hospitals, no antibiotics, no concept of personal hygiene as you know it. Your life is a constant battle against microscopic enemies you don't even know exist. Historians still debate whether the improvement in living conditions for the poor in the late Victorian period was the result of charity and social reform, or whether it was primarily due to economic growth and the general increase in wealth in British society. It is difficult to separate these factors and identify the main cause. You have become accustomed to living with aches and pains, flu, colds. Low-grade fevers are regular visitors, malaises you endure while you continue to work. There is no concept of sick leave. If you don't work, you don't eat. So you swallow the pain, trying to hide your weakness. Because showing it means losing your meager chop. The persistent cough from the factory fumes, the dampness of your rented room, and the poor diet have weakened your immune system to the point where a simple cold can turn into deadly pneumonia. Even in the slums, you notice small changes, like some of the worst houses have been demolished, making way for new housing, which, while still simple, is a little cleaner. The gas lights seem a little brighter now, and the noise of the city, although still present, seems less chaotic. These are signs of an effort, however slow, to improve living conditions for the poor. It is like someone finally deciding to clean up the living room after a decade-long party. The air in your slum is a toxic mix of coal smoke, sewage, and the stench of piled-up garbage. Every breath is a risk. You've seen children with bloodshot eyes, adults with pale skin, and old people with wheezing breaths. Illness isn't something that happens to others. It's a part of life. An unwelcome companion, always waiting for the chance to strike. You also notice a change in the attitude of the police. While they are still a formidable force, they now seem more focused on maintaining order and less violently repressing the poor. Prisons are still harsh, but there is talk of reforming the justice system, of treating prisoners more humanely. These are small signs of a change in social consciousness, a recognition that the poor have a right to be treated fairly. It is a well-known historical fact that cholera, smallpox, and tuberculosis were the leading causes of death in Victorian England, especially in poorer areas. The lack of basic sanitation, contaminated water supplies, and cramped living conditions created the perfect environment for disease to flourish and spread rapidly. The sensationalist penny dreadfuls are still read. But now you also see cheaper newspapers, which provide news and information, not just fiction. This means you have access to more information about the world outside your ghetto, about political debates, about scientific advances. Knowledge is power, and this access to information is a small but important step towards empowering you and people like you. Even daily washing was a challenge. Clean water was a luxury, often drawn from a communal pump, which dozens of other families also drew from. The water was often murky, smelly, and you knew it might carry disease. You would quickly wash your face and hands, trying to remove the surface grime, but the sticky feeling remained. Your clothes were rarely completely clean, and they carried the smell of the city and yourself. Personal hygiene was a losing battle. You see younger people, those born in this era, with a glimmer of hope in their eyes that your generation rarely has. They are less resigned to their fate, and they are willing to fight for a better future. They are the ones who will benefit from the seeds of change that are being planted now. You can feel a quiet pride in seeing this, knowing that your struggles were not in vain. When disease did strike, it was terrifying. There were no doctors to call, no hospitals to go to, at least not ones you could afford. If you had a high fever, severe diarrhea, or a persistent cough, you would lie on your straw mattress, shivering and sweating, hoping your body would be strong enough to fight it off. Relatives or friends might try to help you with folk remedies, herbal teas, or simply a cold cloth on your forehead. But often, it was just a matter of waiting to see if you would survive. It was like playing dare with death. But you never won. A unique or little-known detail is the prevalence of quack doctors and miracle drugs that promise to cure everything from toothaches to cancer. These drugs, often containing opiates, cocaine, or alcohol, provide temporary relief but do not cure the disease, and can even be addictive and make health conditions worse. The poor, in their desperation, are often the most vulnerable victims of these scammers. When you look back on your life, you realize that you were part of a great transformation. You lived through the darkest days of the Industrial Revolution, witnessed its devastation, but you also lived long enough to see the first signs of improvement. Your life is still hard, but it is no longer as hopeless as it was. There are new hopes, new opportunities, however small, that are emerging. You have seen death. It is not a rare or distant event, it is a part of everyday life. You have seen children pale, adults wither, and old people die in their sleep in agony. Death is often swift and brutal, without comfort or dignity. Bodies are often kept in rented rooms for several days, because the family cannot afford an immediate burial, and there is nowhere else to put them. The smell of death, a sweet and sickening odor, will haunt you for days. The echoes of the Victorian era are fading, but they have left a complex legacy. On the one hand, it was a time of extreme exploitation and suffering for the poor. On the other hand, it was also a time of incredible resilience, of charity and resistance, and of the first steps towards a more just society. You are a living testament to both. As you lie down on your straw mattress on this last night, you listen to the sounds of the city. They are still there. The noise of life, the coughing, the scurrying of rats. But now there is a quieter, a more peaceful feeling. The war is not over, but a chapter has been closed. And you, who have survived it all, have become part of history. The public health system, if it existed at all, was extremely rudimentary. Hospitals for the poor, such as St. Bartholomew's or Guy's, were often overcrowded, filthy, and severely understaffed and under-equipped. Surgery was performed without adequate anesthesia, and infection was a near-certain death sentence. Many poor people would rather suffer their illnesses at home than go to those dreaded operating houses. It was like choosing between being attacked by a bear or being attacked by another bear. But with a knife, as the night falls and the sounds of the outside world fade into silence, you lie there, feeling the weight of the thin blanket covering you. The cold is still there, but it is no longer as harsh as before. Just a gentle touch, almost a gentle reminder of days gone by. Your breathing becomes more regular, deeper, and the tension in your body gradually fades, giving way to a feeling of relaxation, almost surrender. Historians still debate whether the introduction of major public hygiene reforms in the mid-19th century, such as the construction of the London sewer system, was the main factor in improving public health, or whether broader socioeconomic changes were more responsible. And it is difficult to distinguish the impact of each factor when everything is so bad. The images of the slums, the dusty streets, the tired faces, are now just distant memories, floating in your mind like clouds across the night sky. You no longer feel the pangs of hunger or the fear of illness. Instead, a gentle peace envelops you, a sense of security you rarely experience. For women, childbirth is one of the most dangerous moments in life. There are no trained midwives, no sanitation, and no prenatal or postnatal care. Many women give birth in filthy conditions, with the help of inexperienced neighbors. Maternal and infant mortality rates are extremely high, and many babies do not survive the first few days of life. Each time a woman becomes pregnant in the slums, it is an event of both hope and extreme fear. You listen to the wind whistling through the cracks in the door, the rustling of leaves outside, and the patter of rain on the roof. These sounds no longer carry fear or harshness, but are simply a gentle symphony of nature, lulling you into a deep sleep. The smell of coal smoke has dissipated, replaced by the smell of damp earth and the freshness of the night air. Children are particularly vulnerable to disease. Their weakened immune systems, malnutrition, and unsanitary living conditions make them especially vulnerable. Measles, whooping cough, diphtheria, and scarlet fever claim the lives of thousands of children each year. You saw the children with their empty eyes, their little bodies ravaged by disease, and you knew that their lives, if they had any, would be short and full of suffering. Let the images of the past drift away, like boats on the river, fading away and disappearing into the mist. You have been on a long journey, a life full of challenges, but now it is time to rest. Your body relaxes, your mind clears, and you feel yourself drifting gently on a calm river towards a peaceful shore. The fear of ending up in the workhouse was also a heavy burden. If you were too sick to work, too weak to support yourself, the workhouse was the last resort. It was not a hospital. It was a place for the poor who could not support themselves. Life there was harsh. Discipline was strict, and families were often torn apart. Many would rather die on the streets than go to the workhouse. You learn to live with this fear. You learn to recognize the first signs of illness in your body, and you pray that it will not get worse. You learn to accept that death is an inevitable companion, always hovering at the edges of your life. But you also learn resilience. You see neighbors helping each other, sharing what they have, caring for the sickest to the best of their ability. In the darkness of illness and pain, there are still rays of kindness and solidarity. Sleep comes gently, like a velvet curtain falling, enveloping you in warmth and silence. You no longer think about tomorrow, about struggles or burdens. There is only peace, deep rest, and a sense of absolute security. Let yourself fall into a dreamless, worry-free, peaceful sleep. When you lie down on your straw mattress at night, you listen to the sounds of the slum coughing, groaning, the scurrying of rats. Each sound is a reminder of the fragility of life. You close your eyes, trying to sleep, but your mind is still haunted by images of illness and death. You hope that you will wake up in the morning, that you will have another day to fight, to survive. That is all you can do. The bitter cold of the London morning bites at your exposed skin as you emerge from the cramped lodging house. Your body, still heavy with the exhaustion of yesterday's labor, protests every movement. But today, your focus isn't just on your own survival, it's on the small, shivering figure clutching your hand, or perhaps trailing just behind you. This is a child, your child, or perhaps a younger sibling, or even just a child you've taken under your wing in this unforgiving city. Their face is smudged with soot, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a premature weariness that belies their tender age. They are not going to school. They are going to work. The streets are already teeming with life, a chaotic symphony of horse-drawn carts, shouting vendors, and the endless shuffle of humanity. But amidst the adult figures that you see them everywhere, children. Tiny figures, barely taller than your waist, darting through the crowds, their small voices hawking matches, newspapers, or flowers. Some are sweeping crossings, their brooms almost as tall as they are, their faces grim with concentration. Others are simply begging, their hands outstretched, their eyes pleading. This is the reality of childhood for the poor in Victorian England, a brutal, truncated existence where innocence is a luxury few can afford. It's like a real-life version of Oliver Twist, but with even less singing and more actual hunger. You remember your own childhood, a hazy, distant memory of perhaps a few brief years of relative freedom before the demands of survival took over. For these children, that freedom is often non-existent. From the moment they can walk, they are expected to contribute to earn their keep, to pull their weight in the desperate struggle against starvation. There are no playgrounds filled with laughter, no classrooms filled with learning, no warm beds for endless sleep. There is only the street, the factory, the mine, and the relentless grind of labor. You claim you're half of a mattress, the straw rustling as you settle down. The air is heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale tobacco, and the faint, sweet scent of decay that seems to emanate from the very walls. There's no ventilation, no way to air out the room, so the accumulated odors of its inhabitants simply fester. You pull your threadbare blanket up to your chin, trying to create a small, personal cocoon, but the cold seeps in from all sides. The sounds of the building are amplified now, the scuttling of mice in the walls, the drip of water from a leaky roof, the distant, mournful cry of a street hawker still trying to sell his wares. If they are lucky, they might have a job in a factory, like you. Their small hands are ideal for reaching into the intricate machinery, for tying broken threads on the looms, or for crawling into tight spaces that adults cannot access. But this luck comes at a terrible price. The dangers are immense crushing machinery, scalding steam, toxic dust. You've seen children lose fingers, hands, even their lives, caught in the unforgiving gears of industry. Their bodies, still developing, are particularly vulnerable to the physical strain and the toxic environment. Their lungs fill with cotton dust, their spines twist from long hours of stooping, and their eyes strain in the dim, polluted light. Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey back in time. Not to the grand ballrooms or the opulent country estates, but deep into the grimy, gas-lit heart of Victorian England. We're going to explore what life was really like for the poor, the forgotten, the ones who kept the wheels of industry turning, often at their own peril. Imagine a world where the air itself tastes of soot and despair, where every breath is a gamble, and the concept of personal space is as foreign as a trip to the moon. You're about to step into their shoes, feel the perpetual damp, and hear the relentless clang of a society built on the backs of the working class. Fair warning, though you probably wouldn't have survived a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.